What's the problem with twin witches? You never know which is which. What's a vampire's favourite ice cream? Vanilla. What do you call a boomerang that won't come back? A stick. If you see a crime at an Apple store, does that make you an eyewitness? Did you hear about the broken guitar for sale? It comes with no strings attached. A young man sees an old man sitting on a bench and asks, "What's your secret to long life, mate?" The old man replies, "I smoke 10 cigars a day, drink a case of whiskey a week, and eat fried food every day." The young man's amazed. "That's incredible. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking, mate?" And the old man says, 25. A man sees a sign in front of a house, "Talking dog for sale." He rings the bell and the owner tells him the dog is in the backyard. The man walks around the house and asks the dog, "Can you talk?" "Yep," the dog replies. "So, what's your story?" The dog looks up and says, "Well, I discovered my ability to talk when I was young. I wanted to help humanity, so I joined the CIA. I spent years travelling around the world sitting in rooms with spies and world leaders because no one ever suspected I was a talking dog. I was awarded numerous medals. After a while, I got tired of the jet-setting life and retired to start a family." The man is amazed and asks the owner how much he wants for the dog. The owner says, $10. The man is stunned. $10? This dog is amazing. Why so cheap? The owner replies, "Because he's a liar. He didn't do any of that stuff." A businessman went into the office and found an inexperienced handyman painting the walls. The handyman was wearing 2 heavy parkas on a hot summer day. Thinking this was a little strange, the businessman asked the handyman why he was wearing the parkas on such a hot day. The handyman showed him the instructions on the can of paint. They read, "For best results, put on 2 coats." Did you know that back in the 1970s, William Shatner decided he wanted to invest his money in textiles? After looking into it, he decided to start up his own lingerie company. It didn't work out though. He had a great product and a really elegant storefront. Unfortunately, Shatner panties never caught on. A nurse walks into a bank totally exhausted after an 18-hour shift. She grabs a deposit slip, pulls a rectal thermometer out of her purse and tries to write with it. When she realises her mistake, she looks at the flabbergasted teller and without missing a beat says, "Oh, well, that's great. Some arsehole's got my pen." A 60-year-old millionaire got married to a 20-year-old model. When his friends asked him how he did it, he said, "It's simple. I lied about my age." The friend said, "Ah, so you said you were 40. The millionaire shook his head. "No, I said I was 90. I had to take my son to the hospital after he swallowed 10 quarters. He was rushed to surgery. After half an hour, I saw a nurse, so I asked her how he was. She said, "There's no change yet." A pregnant woman starts to have contractions at home. Her husband freaks out and immediately calls the doctor. "Doctor, help! My wife is pregnant and her contractions are only 2 minutes apart." The doctor says, "Is this her first child?" Frustrated, the man shouts, "No, you idiot! This is her husband!" A man is walking through the woods when he sees a bear charging at him. He books it, but knows he can't outrun a bear for long, so he starts to pray. "Dear Lord, I beseech thee, please let this bear be a Christian." The bear catches up to him, knocks him down on the ground, then gets on its knees and says, "Dear Lord, thanks you for this food that I am about to receive." There's this man who always smokes 2 cigarettes at the same time. Eventually, one of his friends asks, "What's with the 2 cigarettes?" The man replies, "My brother's in prison and he told me to smoke a cigarette for him every time I smoke one for myself." A few months later, his friend sees the man again and he's smoking only 1 cigarette instead of 2. Surprised, the friend asks, "Has your brother been freed from prison?" The man shakes his head sadly and says, "Nope, I just quit smoking." A guy was walking along a country road when he came upon a farmer working in his field. The man called out to the farmer, "How long will it take me to get to the next town?" The farmer didn't answer. The guy waited a bit and then started walking again. After the man had gone about 100 yards, the farmer yelled out, "About 20 minutes." "Thank you, but why didn't you tell me when I asked you?" The farmer cocked his head to one side and said, "Didn't know how fast you could walk." A prince was put under a spell so that he could only speak only 1 word each year. If he didn't speak for 2 years, the following year he could speak 2 words, and so on. One day he fell in love with a beautiful lady. He refrained from speaking to her for 2 whole years so he could call her "my darling." But then he wanted to tell her he loved her, so he waited 3 more years. At the end of these 5 years, he wanted to ask her to marry him, so he waited another 4 years. Finally, as the 9th year of silence ended, he led the lady to the most romantic place in the kingdom and said, "My darling, I love you. Will you marry me?" And the lady said, "Sorry, can you repeat that?" A guy goes into a company for a job interview. The interviewer asks him, "What would you consider to be your biggest weakness?" The guy thinks for a minute and says, "I'm honest with everyone. I don't know how to be anything other than completely honest, no matter what someone asks me." The interviewer says, "I don't really see how honesty could be considered a weakness. In fact, I think it's a great strength." The guy looks at the interviewer right in the eye and says, "I don't really care what you think, mate." What's long, green, and smells like bacon? Kermit's fingers. I have an EpiPen. My friend gave it to me as he was dying. It seemed very important to me that I have it. A woman gets on a bus with her baby. The bus driver says, "That's the ugliest baby I've ever seen. Ugh." The woman goes to the rear of the bus and sits down fuming. She says to a man next to her, "The driver just insulted me." The man says, "You go right up there and tell him off. Go on, I'll hold your monkey for you." A husband and wife were having an argument, and the wife decided to go for the silent treatment. The husband, realising he was in trouble, wrote on a piece of paper, "Wake me up at 6 a.m. I have a flight." The next morning he woke up at 9 a.m. and missed his flight. Furious, he saw a piece of paper on the side table which said, "Wake up, it's 6 a.m. A dad buys a lie detector robot which slaps people when they lie. He decides to test it at dinner. "Son, where were you today?" The son says, "At school, Dad." Robot slaps the son. "Okay, I watched a DVD at my friend's house." "What DVD?" "Kung Fu Panda." Robot slaps the son again. "Okay, it was an adult film." Dad yells, "What? When I was your age, I didn't know what an adult film was." Robot slaps the dad. Mum laughs. "He's certainly your son." Robot slaps the mum. What's 4 inches long, 2 inches wide, and drives women crazy? An empty toilet paper roll. A man goes to a pet shop and buys a talking parrot. He takes the parrot home and tries to teach the parrot how to say a few things, but instead, the parrot just swears at him. After a few hours of this, the man finally gets fed up and throws the parrot into the freezer to teach it a lesson. He hears the parrot squawking and kicking for a few minutes, but then it all goes quiet. The man opens the freezer up. The parrot calmly steps out onto the man's outstretched arm and says, "I believe I may have offended you with my rude language and actions. I'll endeavour to correct my behaviour." The man is astounded. As he's about to ask the parrot what's caused this sudden change in attitude, the parrot continues, "May I just ask, what did the turkey do?" "So how long are you in for?" I asked my cellmate. "Just a couple of minutes, then I'm finished," he said, as he carried on thrusting. At the Olympics, I saw an athletic guy carrying a long stick and asked him, "Are you a pole vaulter?" He looked surprised and said, "No, I am a German, but how did you know my name is Walter?" Guy is shocked to find out that his friend wears a bra. He said to him, "How long have you been wearing that for?" The friend replies, "Ever since my wife found it in my glove compartment." After a long debate with my wife, we decided that we wasn't going to vaccinate our children. We thought the doctor would make a better job of it. A man notices a pirate and asks him, "Excuse me, sir, but why do you have a hook hand?" The pirate says, "Arr, yes, me hook hand. A sword cut me right below the elbow." "Well, what about your peg leg?" says the man. "Arr, me peg leg. A cannonball shot me right below the kneecap." "Well, what about your patch eye?" "Arr, me patch eye. I was standing on the poop deck and a seagull pooped in me eye." "A seagull pooped in your eye? That can't take an eye out." "Arr, but you've got to remember, it was me first day with me hook." Does a Welshman find a sheep in long grass? Irresistible. What do you call a snake that's exactly 3.14 metres long? A python. What's 7 inches long and hasn't been sucked on in over 2 years? Whitney Houston's crack pipe. What's Irish and stays out all year long? Patio furniture. This morning at about 7:45, I was in a long line at a grocery store that opens at 8 o'clock for senior citizens only. A young man came from the parking lot and tried to cut in at the front of the line, but an old lady beat him back into the parking lot with her cane. He returned and tried to cut in again, but an old man punched him in the gut, then kicked him to the ground and he rolled away. As he approached the line for the third time, he said, "Look, if you don't let me unlock the damn door, you're never going to get in there." For a high school dance, the head boy asked out the girl he liked. To get flowers for her, he had to stand in a line outside the florist for an hour. To make things worse, he had to wait another hour outside the tuxedo shop. Finally, he goes to the dance with the girl. The girl wanted to have some apple punch, so the boy went to get it. But to his surprise, there was no punchline. A tough old cowboy from Texas counselled his granddaughter that if she wanted to live a long life, the secret was to sprinkle a pinch of gunpowder on her oatmeal every morning. The granddaughter did this religiously until the age of 103 when she died. She left behind 14 children, 30 grandchildren, 45 great-grandchildren, 25 great-great-grandchildren, and a 40-foot hole where the crematorium used to be. What was a more useful invention than the first telephone? The second telephone? My nagging wife died suddenly on a trip to Jerusalem. Funeral director: "Sir, it would cost about £45,000 if we were to send her back home to the United Kingdom. or £500 if we bury her here in Jerusalem? Me. Ship her home. Funeral director. But sir, why don't you bury her here in the Holy Land and you can save money? Me. A long time ago, a man was buried here and 3 days later he rose from the dead. I just can't take that chance. What time is it when people are throwing pieces of bread at your head? Time to duck. During my checkup, I asked the doctor, so do you think I'll live a long and healthy life then? He replied, I doubt it somehow. Mercury is in Uranus right now. I said, oh, I don't go for any of that astrology nonsense. He replied, neither do I. My thermometer just broke. My girlfriend and I are trying this whole long-distance relationship thing. I have to stay 100 feet away from her at all times. Also, the police say I have to stop calling her my girlfriend. A guy is sitting at home when he hears a knock at the door. He opens the door and sees a snail on the porch. He picks up the snail and throws it as far as he can. A year later, there's another knock at the door. He opens it and sees the same snail standing there. The snail says, what was that all about? Why did Santa scream? His sack fell into the fireplace. What's worse than finding a worm in your apple? Finding a vein in your hot dog? A man walks into a laundromat and goes up to the guy working behind the counter. He takes the items out of his bag and he says, I need to have these clothes clean, please. The guy behind the counter doesn't hear him and he says, come again? The man shakes his head and says, mustard this time. A man walks into a psychiatrist's office completely wrapped from head to toe in shrink wrap. The psychiatrist takes one look at the man and says, I can see your nuts. What goes in hard and dry, but comes out soft and wet? Chewing gum. My sexy Chinese neighbour told me that she was desperate for a Roger. It was only when I was stood there with my pants round my ankles I realised she was looking to rent out a spare room. Why isn't there a pregnant Barbie doll? Because Ken came in another box. What's the difference between purple and pink? The grip. A woman walks into a doctor's office complaining of acute angina. The doctor says, aren't bad either. What's 6 inches long, hard as a rock and full of semen? The sock under my bed. I started my new job as a bingo caller last night, and halfway through calling the numbers, I farted loudly. My boss immediately came over and whispered in my ear, don't do that again. Sorry, I said. It must have been the nerves. Fair enough, he replied, but there was no need to hold the microphone to your arse. I just bought 51% of a vampire hunting company. I'm now the official main stakeholder. Why does Dr. Pepper come in a can? Because his wife died.